Hey there, in this video I'm going to be taking this image which doesn't have any editing applied, and I'm going to show you my artistic process on how I edit images. I'm using Lightroom, but it doesn't really matter what editing software you use. It's more about that artistic intention. So this was a shot I took in one of the gorges in the beautiful Kalbarri National Park in Western Australia. And if you want to see the full video behind this and the other images, I'll put a link in the description. So we're going to start off by coming over to the Basic tab. And I always just like to play with the exposure just to see what detail we've got. You can see we've still got some decent detail in those trees. And we've got basically quite a nicely exposed image. If we look at the histogram, it's kind of skewing to the dark, but if we turn on shadow clipping, we don't really have any of the shadows clipped, even though we might get a little bit of noise in some of those shadows. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just kind of even out that exposure a little bit. Just going to bring that exposure slide up, and then we'll add a little bit of contrast just to start to see how things are going to turn out. You can see that beautiful white in this water down here as I'm playing with that contrast. So we're definitely going to want to do something to accentuate these beautiful little long exposure ripples in the water. I'm going to start with the white balance here, and I'm just going to bring this up until it's looking more how I remember it on the day. I think that's a bit too much. These rocks, and this, especially this canyon up here, were amazing. So it's definitely too cool. Bring this all the way up. I don't want these ripples to turn white, of course, or yellow, I should say. And I'm keeping my eye on these trees as well, because I want these colors to be fairly well balanced. But I also want it to look and get across the feeling of the place, the warmth of this amazing, all these amazing red rocks. All right. So you can see that the trees on the top left here are kind of looking a little bit too bright, but we can fix that later. So when I look at this image, this was shot in a 16:9, so I just hit L a couple of times so I can visualize it a bit more. This was shot in a 16:9 aspect ratio, so we're already cropped in Lightroom for that. If I'm looking at this, the swirls definitely are the interesting part of this image. So we want to work out how we can direct the eye to these and then kind of lead the eye around here and maybe sweep it around. And because this is one of the brightest areas of the image up here, the eye is being drawn to that at the minute as well. So we probably want to try and keep the eye. We've got a bit of interesting stuff going on down here, so that's cool. But really, we're going to kind of bring the eye on a journey through the image in almost like a S shape here. So to do that, we're going to need to de-emphasize some parts of the image and then emphasize other parts. So what we're going to do here, okay, we'll turn off that mode. When you first look at a photo, sometimes it's hard to really know what you want to do with the image. Some images you just know exactly what you need to do, and then you're good to go. Other images you look at, and again, I don't think this is, if I'm completely honest, an amazing composition, but we do have some things to work with here. Okay, so I'm going to come down to the color mixer, and I just want to make sure that the saturation of these rocks is how I want them to be. We don't want to go too much because it's just going to look like Mars. I don't really want it to look like Mars. So something like there. Just click and hold that button. That's the before and that's the after. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. And we might just do something with these trees because it's kind of annoying me. If I'm honest, it just keeps drawing my eye. So we're going to go with a radial. No, are we? No. Let's not do that. Let's do a linear gradient. And we'll drag a nice soft gradient over this area. And we'll just bring down the highlights a bit. And the exposure a bit. Okay, that's before and that's afterwards. So we're starting to control that area a bit more. We might have to come back to that in a minute. Okay, so I think also we're going to grab a really big radial gradient here, because I know that I want to do something with this water. Don't know exactly what yet, and that's a weird thing about editing photos. Sometimes I know that some area needs something, but I haven't decided what yet. And it's very easy, to think that everyone's a photo editing expert. But sometimes you just have to play, because I think play is really important in art. It shouldn't all be about the technical aspects of it. So what are we going to do here? I think we're going to bring up the whites like that, and we're going to add just a little bit of clarity. I always find that clarity can really help with water, but if you go too far, it's going to look terrible. So let's just go there. Always do before and after, and you can see how that water, or that white, is just really coming to life now, and I really like that. But what are we going to do with the rest of this image? Unfortunately, this bottom left corner is kind of taking up too much, but we've got some nice little patches here, so I think we're just going to try and bring those out with a bit of masking. Good old faithful radial. And I'm just going to use this as a bit of a test area. What I want to do is come over to the color, and I'm just going to increase the color temperature a bit. If I go too far, it's going to look terrible. Like that, maybe there. And we'll go and increase the whites just a little bit, and then we'll add a touch of contrast too. So before and after, you see how it's giving it that almost like a metallic look, and I really like that. Not sure whether I want to do the same thing for all of this. It might look a bit too much, but let's go and duplicate this mask, and we'll drag it over here. And yeah, that's actually looking quite nice. And I can just drag this around, and it gives me a really quick way of visualizing what areas it might be useful on. And I kind of feel like, let's go for it. Let's go wild. And this is what it looks like without, and on, off, on. So I think that's really doing a nice job of bringing that out there. There's not much to bring out here. See, this is all dark down here, so I don't want to go and artificially try and make this look orange and metallic, because it's not really going to work. But we might be able to do something with this water. Let's go and grab another radial gradient, and you can see I use these radial gradients all the time. Maybe we just do that. Again, I'm not exactly sure what I want to do with this water. I just know that I want to do something with it. I'm going to come to clarity, because again, clarity with water, but that looks terrible. So we'll just add the tiniest amount of clarity and the tiniest amount of maybe contrast. Let's have a look at that. And the tiniest increase in the white. I think that's going a bit too much. This is the before, and that's the after. I kind of feel like this area here is getting a bit too bright, so we're going to pull that radial mask down, and something like that. All right, how are we doing? Hit L on the keyboard. Yeah, that's getting a bit better. This area up here is way too bright though. That's really distracting, and it's obviously a lot of white water was moving around this. So let's go and just reduce the distraction of that. Grab a radial gradient and something like that. And then we'll just pull down the whites a little bit just to soften that off. Not too much. This area up here definitely needs some more work. Grab another radial gradient, and we want to just kind of control the brightness on these trees a bit, because it's just a bit too much. So we'll just bring the whites down a bit for that. The highlights down just a touch. Now we're getting some of that detail back, which is really nice. Okay. So if I look at this, I'm not really sure how I want to proceed with this. I think this area around here is just a tiny bit too bright. Just a tiny bit too. So grab a radial gradient, and I just want to drop the whites just a little bit in that area. I don't go too far. So before and after, I don't know, maybe we'll just drop the highlights instead. That'll give us a little bit more contrast. And okay, before and after. We're getting a little bit more detail there. If we wanted to, we could even apply some dehaze, and dehaze is, if I whack it on full mode, can be crazy. So let's be careful with that. I don't know why it's not updating on this screen. It is updating on my external screen, so just a bit of a quirk there. So probably not going to bother with the dehaze. Okay, so before, after. Okay, that's just very subtle, but I kind of like to build up my edits this way, where I'm doing a subtle thing and then another subtle thing, and then because they're all separate masks as well, you can turn individual masks on and off and see if something's overdone or see if there's a different way to approach something. Right, how are we looking with exposure? Turn this on. We have got some highlight clipping there, so let's head back to that mask and we'll grab the white slider. We'll drop that down just so we're not clipping too much of it. Something like that. Right, let's have another look. Turn off highlight clipping, of course, so we can see it. The only thing we don't have a lot of in this image is actually, we don't have a lot of color contrast. It's a lot of red. We've got a bit of white. So I'm wondering if we can do something to bring out the greens of these trees. So let's grab our saturation and see what happens if we change these greens. See, it's affecting a little bit of the riverbed there, but if I'm pulling this down, I kind of actually like what's happening in just watching this riverbed here. You can see we've got the reflections of some of that green and maybe some green moss or something. So it's interesting how that affects that. Not sure. Not sure about that. Obviously we don't want that. Next thing I'm going to do is apply a custom vignette. And I tend to use these a lot, especially when I'm struggling with an image in terms of where I want people's eyes to wander. So we're going to drag this over the area we want. Probably going to actually rotate it. I'm going to tick here to invert that, and then we'll just completely whack the exposure down, and that's super extreme. I kind of like it in a way, but we do need to back that off a bit. So I kind of feel like something like that. Let's take a look. So before and after. I don't know, let me know in the comments whether you think that vignette is too much. I kind of feel it is too much, but I like how it's kind of helping control these trees. Let's just back that off a bit, just a little bit. All right. Come back to the global controls, head to detail. We want to come and add some masking. So I'm going to hold down Alt, drag the masking control just so we can control where that sharpening is applied. Let's just zoom in here. I always like to max out the sharpening, and you can see how it's going all dotty. And then that's with no sharpening or default sharpening. So we'll just try and find a happy medium there. It's with no sharpening, with no width. I think I'm happy with that. Let's have another look. Okay, I think we'll call that image finished. This channel is all about landscape photography, both out in the field taking the photos and these kind of videos where I take you through my artistic editing process. So if you love landscape photography, please subscribe. I'd really, really appreciate that. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video.